This foundation is especially important for the African entrepreneurs because it's a foundation that carries the context of the environment in which we operate on this continent. So today we continue to lay on top of that foundation and building the last part of this message. We have talked about the creative process as an entrepreneurial mandate from God. And in that first session, we introduced the value creation ladder, which was the first ladder that I introduced to you. The second ladder that I brought to you was the purpose ladder, aiming at discovering the purpose for which we are created as human beings, not only the corporate purpose, but also the purpose for each and every one of us, and how we can climb the purpose ladder and reach a place where we are aware of our purpose in this world. After that, we shared on the vision ladder. The vision ladder, we shared it as part of identifying opportunities and capturing those opportunities on the African continent. And then last week, I shared on the fourth ladder, which is the freedom ladder, because we appreciated that even if you know the value creation chain and you are aware of your purpose and you know your vision, it's very difficult for you to achieve that purpose or to live fully to the dictates of that purpose when you are not free to do that. So we then defined freedom. And after defining freedom, we then discussed the freedom ladder as a ladder that one can climb from the first rung to the 8th rung to get to a place where they can actually call themselves free. But one thing remained clear as we were discussing those things. And it is that even if you know your purpose, even if you have a vision, even if you understand value, and you are now free, something must happen to you as a person. Something must happen to you as an entrepreneur. Something must happen corporately to communities, to nations, and to continents to then realize the full benefits of this knowledge that we are sharing. And that key that I'm going to share with you today is capacity. You cannot live your purpose fully if you don't develop the capacity to fulfill that purpose. Even if you are free, even if you understand value, you can't realize the fullness of the vision that you have if you don't build the capacity inside of you. So, like I said, there are 5 foundational ladders that every entrepreneur needs to know. And not only to know them, but to walk through. I have given you 4 of them, and today I'll give you the last ladder, which is the capacity ladder. 8 stages to becoming capable of greater responsibility. Now, I'm going to read from a scripture in 2 Kings 4, from verse 1 to 7. It's a scripture that most of us know. And I'll read. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is no jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil, pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." Suppose you know your purpose. Suppose you see opportunities. Suppose you have become free enough to pursue them. What if you still believe you don't have enough? You don't have enough money. You don't know anyone who can assist you financially, or who can give you any sort of help. You are not experienced enough. You just finished school, and every job that you are applying to is saying you need to have experience. You don't have it. You don't have connections. You don't have equipment. You don't have confidence. Where does one begin? I've come to understand that every entrepreneur eventually asks that question. Where do I start? And many people are asking this question because they believe they don't have anything that is of value that they can use to start whatever enterprise they want to start. And maybe someone is asking themselves that question today, or has asked themselves that question before. And we look at successful entrepreneurs. And most of the times we think that they are successful because somebody believed in them. They are successful because somebody gave them money. They are successful because they come from wealthy families. Maybe they had doors opened through opportunities that came in their lives. Some went to very good schools, and from those schools they got friends, and those friends became partners in their businesses and things like that. And when we look at our lives, the question that we ask ourselves is, so what is it that we have? And this is a reality for most African entrepreneurs, because we are genuinely coming from a place where we lack a lot of things. Some people fail to actually go to school, but they still have to build a business for them to survive. They still have to work. Okay? So, we have all said to ourselves, if only I had more, I would start this thing. If only I had more capital, if only I had more time, more education, more connections, more support. But what if the greatest obstacle to your future is not what you lack, but how you think about what you possess? Because I personally believe that everyone on this earth has something that is of value, something that God has given them, something that they can use to start whatever they want to start. I do not believe that God will put you on this earth and then take away every opportunity. We all have something. But unfortunately, some of those things are not very visible. They don't shout for attention because we are familiar with those things. Now, familiarity has a tendency to reduce the value of anything that you have. That is the reason why Jesus even said the prophet is not without honor except in his own house. The reason why a prophet cannot be honored in his own house is because those in his own family are familiar to him. They know him as their brother. They know him as the carpenter. So how can they wake up and then start looking at him as a savior? How can they change what they know about him and automatically say, this is no longer the carpenter, this is now the Christ, this is the Son of God? How can you become the Son of God when we know that you are the son of Mary and Joseph? Now all of a sudden you're saying, you are the son of what? You're the Son of God. It doesn't make sense. So familiarity has a tendency to reduce the value of everything that's in our lives. But God almost never begins where we want him to begin. Whenever we look at what we want to do, we always look at what's missing. If I want to start a business, the next thing that I think is I don't have the money. Okay? Almost always, when you ask an entrepreneur, what's the biggest hurdle that you have right now? They will tell you it's money. If I had money, I would have done this. If I had money, I would have built this. If I had money, my company would have grown to this size. But where we begin with deficiency, where we begin by looking at what is absent, God begins by looking at what is present. Where we pray and say, Lord, I need more, God is showing us that he always responds and says, what do you already have? And it's a question that every entrepreneur must ask themselves. What do you already have? And I believe that that question is the most important entrepreneurial question that has been asked in the Bible. what do you have in your house? Elisha is asking the widow. And I want you to think about this situation, because a lot of the times when we ask you to think about your situation, you become defensive. But we use the story of this widow as a reflection that we can put in the mirror so that you can see how desperate her situation was. Her husband has just died. She is in mourning. But the husband left a very big debt, and one of the debtors has come, and he wants to take her 2 sons to be slaves, to repay the debt that the father left. If there was someone who was justified to say, I have nothing, it is this lady. She had every right to say she has nothing. And even most of the people who are listening right now, they have every right to speak like that. They have lost a lot. You probably don't have enough. You don't know anyone. You don't have any connections. You have no opportunities. You don't even have enough food to eat tonight. You have no capital. It seemed all your chances of success in this life are closed because of the situation that you are in. And these words, I have nothing, sound familiar. But when you listen to the woman, before she could finish that sentence, she then proceeds to say, except a small jar of olive oil. Except a small jar of olive oil. And that word changes the entire story. Because hidden between the I have nothing and the except was her future. She almost dismissed something that was in her life that God could use to change her life. But she remembered that in the middle of all this, I have something. A small jar of oil. Now I want you to reflect back on your life. What's your except? What is that one thing that you consider to be small, that is so tiny, that if you asked what you have today, you would say, I have nothing except this thing. For some people, it's education. You have nothing except your education. For some people, it's experience. You have nothing except your experience. For some people, it's even your hands. You have nothing except your hands. Some people don't have hands, but you do. And you can use these hands to do something. Except my relationships. Some people have very strong relationships with people who can actually help them. To some, it's just a computer. Knowledge, faith, time, ideas, determination, all those things are things that you can use to start something. And a lot of the times your breakthrough is hiding behind that except. Because I believe the greatest lie in entrepreneurship is that we have been told that we need more before we can begin. And this has been compounded by Silicon Valley. Someone comes with an idea, they sketch it on a piece of paper, and then they take that idea, they start going around, and they get funded before they even build anything. And these are the stories that we read. These are the stories that we are told. And because we see this happening in other markets, we want the same thing to happen in our own market. It sounds reasonable, it sounds logical, but unfortunately, it's almost always not the way God works. Think about it. When Moses stood before the burning bush, God did not ask Moses what he wished he had. This time, Moses is just a shepherd with sheep. And the only thing that he has is a stick, a staff, a shepherd's staff. When David stood before Goliath, he didn't have the shiny armor. He didn't have anything. He used a sling that he already had, something that he had been using for a very long time. When Jesus was feeding the 5,000, what did he use? A young boy's lunch, 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Are you seeing this pattern? Again and again, God refuses to begin with what is absent. He begins with what is present. Not because what is present is enough, but because what is present is the seed that he has given you. And I want to tell you this afternoon that every harvest that you see begins with a seed. And the first lesson that I want you to understand about capacity is that capacity is built, not given. Are we understanding this? God is less interested about giving us more things than he is interested in increasing our capacity. When we think and look at the widow, Elisha was a prophet, and he could have simply prayed and said, God, fill this lady's house with money. What was her problem? It was money. Are you understanding this? Her husband owed money. The debtors that were coming were looking for money. So the prophet could have said, look, this is the money. Let's pray for it. And then you receive the money, you pay your debts. But instead, he gave her a process. Because he doesn't want you to go to the money, which is the end result. He wants to start from the beginning and give you a process that produces the money. Many of the ideas that we have died because we refused to follow the process. And we rushed straight to the outcome, which is the money. A process changes us when we go through it. If God had simply paid a debt, she would still be the same person. Instead, God transformed her into a producer. Somebody who creates value, and out of that value, she extracts it and then gets the money. That woman did not receive a handout. She built an enterprise. She gathered jars. She organized resources. She worked with her sons. She produced value. She sold the oil. She paid her debts. And she had enough to live on. This woman entered this story as a victim. And she left this story as a builder. That is the miracle. The oil mattered. It was important. But the greater miracle was the transformation of the woman, what she became out of this process. And as I reflected on this story, I realized something. That capacity grows exactly like vision grows, exactly like freedom grows. It isn't given all at once, it is developed, one stage at a time, one decision at a time, one discipline at a time, one responsibility at a time. It is climbed. And that is why I want to leave you with this ladder I call the capacity ladder. 8 stages to becoming capable of greater responsibility as entrepreneurs. There is no entrepreneur or builder who is born with extraordinary capacity. Everyone that we see handling a big responsibility grows into it. And the beautiful thing is that every single person in this room can begin climbing. And you don't start climbing when you have more. You don't start climbing when life becomes easier. Or when someone discovers you, you begin with what you already have. Are we understanding this? You begin with what? With what you already have. I saw a video of young children from Africa performing at the World Cup with Burna Boy and Shakira, the world's largest stage. What did they start with? Their legs. Dancing in their village. And someone just pointed a camera to them doing what they can with what they had. And that dancing is what brought them to the world's largest stage. What made them perform at that stage is not the presence of Shakira or Burna Boy. What made them perform at that stage is the training and the capacity that they had been building for a very long time. Are you understanding this? The things that we despise, the things that we don't value, sometimes those are the things that are most valuable in our lives. These are children without a degree. We haven't gotten any certificate in life. We haven't gone to any dancing academy. But that we found dancing by someone who said, I think there is a future here. But whoever discovered them, he discovered them while they were dancing. He did not come and say, I'm looking for children that can dance. He found them dancing. Are you understanding this? So, you begin with what you already have, what is already in your house. And that is where our journey begins. On the first rung of the capacity ladder, which is awareness. And awareness answers the simple question, what has God placed in my hands? And I want you to notice that almost every ladder that we have gone through starts at the same place, awareness. The Bible says in Matthew 25, verse 29, for everyone who has, more will be given, and he will be furnished richly so that he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. I want to read that last statement again, because it's an oxymoron. It doesn't mean anything. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. The first sentence is saying you don't have anything. And then the second sentence comes and says what you have will be taken away. Are you understanding this? That statement seems like a statement that doesn't mean anything. But I personally believe that it's talking about an awareness. The one who does not have is not necessarily someone who has nothing. It's someone who is failing to identify what they have in their life, who is failing to use what they have in their life, who is failing to value what they have in their life, to a point where they feel like they don't have anything. That's the person to whom it's being said that even what you have, that one thing that you don't value, that you haven't noticed, it will be taken away. Awareness, not abundance, not opportunity, is what protects what you have. Elisha doesn't ask, what do you need? He asks, what do you have? Those are two different questions. The first question focus is the deficiencies. The second question focuses on available resources, and therefore it produces a responsibility. When you ask, what do you need? You are teaching someone to wait for you. Because once you ask me, what do I need, and I tell you I need money, the next thing that's happening is I'm going to wait for you to bring me the money. But when you ask me, what do you have? Automatically, I go back into my life, look thoroughly at my life, and try to find what I have before I can come back to you and give you an answer. Nothing except a jar of oil. As entrepreneurs, we need to start asking ourselves, what can we build with what we already have? What can we build with what we already have? That seems like a very small shift, but it changes everything. If I asked anyone here to write a list of what they don't have, you will find that a lot of people will come up with a very long list. I don't have capital, I don't have experience, I don't have customers, I don't have an education, my confidence is very low, I can't write, I can't speak, I can't do this. You understand? You will write a very long list. But the minute that I turn and I change that question, and I ask, what do you have? You'll find the list becomes what? It becomes very small. The reason why that list is small is because a lot of us spend more time thinking about what's missing, and that stops us from seeing what is present. And unfortunately, whatever occupies your attention eventually shapes your thinking. If you are constantly thinking that I don't have much, your mind will be conditioned to think in the language of lack. But if you continuously focus on your life and you start looking for the things that you actually have, consciously making a list of the things that you have, and this is a habit that I think we should start practicing. Always take down a piece of paper and write something that you have. Even if you can do it every day, at the end of the day, find that one thing that you have, write it down. Because when you start taking stock of the things that you have in your life, that is how you build awareness. Because you cannot build anything with resources that you refuse to recognize. Are you understanding this? Here in Africa, we use a lot of thatch, grass, to roof our houses. Okay? If you take someone who is coming from Europe, where thatched houses are not the normal thing, and they have built a house, and you ask them to put a roof, they are tempted to tell you that I don't have anything to use because I don't have asbestos, or I don't have roofing sheets or tiles or things like that, because that is what they are used to. Are you understanding this? But because in our context, we have gotten ourselves used to not having these things. The next thing that they are thinking of is, I'm going to go into the bush, cut some grass, and put a roof over my head. Why? Because that is what we what? That is what we have. So, we need to challenge this thinking of lack. And we need to start taking an inventory of our problems, not of our problems, sorry, but of the things that we actually have. The problems that we have are real, they are not imaginary. On this continent, capital is scarce. Interest rates are high. So even if you want to borrow from the bank, you know the interest rates are very high. We have a lot of policy uncertainty, power shortages, limited infrastructure, small markets. There's global competition for almost all the ideas that we want to build. These things are not imaginary. But we need to also consciously start taking inventory of our strengths. As Africa, if we start saying, look, what are our strengths? We'll find a young population. We'll find resilience, people who are willing to work and to produce under very difficult conditions. Creativity, the ability to do more with less. Community, we have a well-knit community here in Africa that we can take advantage of. Natural resources, untapped markets, local knowledge, growing technology adoption. These are all opportunities that are around us, things that we have. We have a lot of assets that we can use because when we teach ourselves to see both the deficiencies and the abundance that we have, we are then able to properly make decisions about where we ought. So, when I ask entrepreneurs, what has God placed in your hands? That question is not asking about money. Because to build any successful business, the last thing that we need to have is money. And the first thing that we need to have is what? An idea. And an idea comes from an insight that we have on a problem that we have around us. That knowledge, that skill, your profession, your work ethic, your reputation, your network, your character, your curiosity, that ability to solve problems, or simply your willingness to learn. These are things that you can start with. It's a way to identify what you have. Because people cannot ask you to help them with something that you don't have. Ask yourself, what comes naturally to you? To some people, it's cracking jokes. But because it comes naturally, it has no value. But the whole creative economy has started because of social media. Those jokes that were not that valuable when you were sharing them in the village, now they are building a community around you on the social networks. It's something that you what? That you actually have. What problems do you actually solve without thinking too much about? These are all clues onto things that you have. And sometimes your greatest capacity is hidden inside the things that feel ordinary because you've lived with these things for so long. Like I said, familiarity kills destinies. The widow had lived with a jar of oil every day. It had become ordinary. Yet in God's economy, that ordinary oil became extraordinary. Not because the oil changed, but because awareness changed. Now, I want to give you something practical. It's called a capacity audit. And I want you to take a notebook and divide the page into 6 headings. The first thing that I want you to take an audit of is your knowledge. What do I know? What have I learned through education, work, or life? The second thing that I want you to audit is what can I actually do well? Because this helps you to expose the things that you have pushed aside and labeled as not important. The third thing that I want you to audit is relationships. Who do I know? Who trusts me? And who might open a door for me? The fourth thing is resources. What physical assets do I possess? What equipment do I have? What space do I have? What technology do I have? What tools do I have? The fifth thing is experience. What have I lived through that has taught me something valuable? What have I succeeded in? What have I failed at? Because losses and victories are all carrying knowledge. They're carrying lessons that we can apply. And finally, I want you to do a character audit. What kind of a person am I becoming? Am I dependable, disciplined, honest? Am I persistent? Do I give up too easily? You need to take an audit of that, because character is capacity too. In fact, it may be the greatest capacity of all. Now, here is something fascinating that I want you to look at. Elisha never tells the widow to go looking for oil. He tells her to recognize the oil that she already has. That teaches us our first principle of the capacity ladder. God rarely begins increasing your resources. He begins by increasing your awareness of them. And I will repeat this. God rarely begins by increasing your resources. He begins by increasing your awareness of them. And that sentence is worth remembering, because many of us are looking and praying for multiplication while God is asking, what have I already entrusted you with? What have I entrusted you with? If God never gave you another resource today, what could you still build with everything He has already placed in your hands? If you stopped thinking that if God gave me this, I'll do this. What if we say God has stopped giving you anything until you use what you have? What is that one thing that you have that you're going to use? And I want you to think about that, because the answer that you give reveals so much about your current capacity and what you can actually do. That is awareness. And awareness is only the beginning, because recognizing your capacity is one thing. The second thing is valuing it. Many of us know what we have, but we understand what that thing that we have could actually become. Now, if you recognize what you have, but you lack appreciation of what you have, it changes very little in your life. So the question is, how do we move from awareness to appreciation? And here we have to build the first bridge that will take us to the next rung. And that bridge is gratitude. We need to learn to have an attitude of gratitude. Gratitude is not usually considered an entrepreneurial principle. But I personally believe that it is one of the most important. Why? Because you cannot develop what you despise. If you look at your education and you say it's only a diploma, you will never invest in it. If you look at your business and you say it's only a small shop, you will never grow it. If you look at your gift and you say everyone can do this, you will never master it. Gratitude is the key to seeing what God has already entrusted you with. And it is the key to building your capacity. It's not just a small business. It's a seed of a larger business, a larger enterprise. It's not just a relationship. It's a seed for a network. It's not just an idea. It's a seed for an institution. That is what gratitude does. It teaches you to honor small beginnings. And the moment you begin honoring what God has already placed in your hands, you begin seeing it differently. You stop asking, what do I have? And you begin asking, what could this become? And that takes us to the second rung of the capacity ladder. And this is appreciation. The minute that you ask, what could this become? What could this become? The woman and Elijah were both looking at the same jar. The jar never changed. Its size, its color never changed. Its contents didn't change. The woman saw it as a small jar of oil. Elisha saw it as the beginning of an enterprise that would take this woman out of a present situation and take her to the ideal place that she wanted to go. And that is one of the defining characteristics of every entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are the people who see potential before they see results. They see possibilities before they see profits. Entrepreneurs see enterprises where everyone else sees good ideas. And this is the reason why appreciation is so important. It teaches us to look beyond the present and begin imagining the future. Picture this. Two people can look at exactly the same thing, and one person will walk away, and the other person will look at the very same thing, and they'll build a business out of it. Two people will see an empty building. The other one will say, this is a dilapidated place. It's an abandoned warehouse. There's nothing that I can do with this. The other person will say, out of this place, I'm going to build a manufacturing plant. Do you see the difference? Someone will look at agricultural waste, another one will say, what can this become? And they will see biofuel. Someone will see a long queue, another will say, what can this become? And from there, they will build a software company to manage that problem. So the difference is really the object that we are looking at. The difference is the appreciation of what we are looking at. Most people end at seeing what something is, and they don't go beyond that to see what it could actually become. And this is where confusion with entrepreneurs come. Because a lot of the times people ask, why are entrepreneurs so excited about something that is so ordinary? But to a real entrepreneur, nothing is ordinary because we bring out the extra out of that ordinary thing. Entrepreneurs do not respond to what exists today. They're driven by their vision of what this thing could become, because that is where great enterprises begin. Not with certainty, but with possibility. And I believe the greatest danger that can happen to any entrepreneur is becoming too familiar with what you have to a point where you stop appreciating its value. The jar had become ordinary, common, unremarkable. Just something in your house. Until someone asked a better question. What can Africa become? What can your life become? Sometimes we don't need more resources. Sometimes we simply need someone to help us see our existing resources differently. What has become familiar in your life? Your profession? Your work? Your experience? Your reputation? Your health? Your ability to communicate? that thing that you're considering as not important, someone would gladly pay to possess that very knowledge that you are dismissing today. So it's important that we start making that shift. When we look at something and we ask, what is it worth today? We will send it away for no profit at all. Someone comes, looks at a stone that you're holding, and they ask you, what's that? And you say, it's just a stone. Then they say, can I take it and give you $10 for it? You say, yes, it's just a stone. And you give them. But they go wherever they are going, they process that stone, and they find gold in it, and then they sell that gold for more money. The next thing you're saying, they stole from you. No, they did not steal from you. They asked a better question. What could this become? If I developed it, if I put in the work, if I did something about it. And I want you to write this down. A skill developed becomes expertise. Expertise applied becomes value. Value organized becomes an enterprise. An enterprise sustained becomes an institution. A skill developed becomes expertise. Expertise applied becomes value. Value organized becomes an enterprise. An enterprise sustained becomes an institution. Every institution begins as something small that someone chooses to appreciate rather than ignore. And I want you to think about Africa for a moment. We're a continent that has been defined by what we lack. But I think we need a generation of builders who will come and ask a different question. What could Africa become? What could my country become? What could this city become? What could this community become? And those questions are not naive optimism. They are entrepreneurial thinking. Because unfortunately, no great nation was ever built by people who only describe their present reality. Every great nation that we see under the sun was built by people who imagined a different future and then worked to create it. And the same is true for your enterprise. Before anyone believes in your vision, you must appreciate first yourself. Appreciate its potential. Appreciate what it can become. I want us to make this practical. I want you to revisit the capacity audit that we began with at the awareness run. And I want you to choose one item from that list, just one, and then ask yourself 3 questions. If I deliberately developed this over the next 5 years, what could it become? Who could it help? What problem could it solve? When you sit with those questions, you don't rush at them. The possibilities that you see will begin to grow. They will grow. But this is something that I want you to understand. Appreciation is not pretending. Okay? It's not pretending. It's not pretending that your seed is already a tree. It's not pretending that your current abilities is there, as raw as they are enough. You need to develop capacity. What appreciation does is it simply refuses to judge your future by your current size. You are a seed. And no matter how small you are as a seed, if you are planted in the right environment and taken care of, you can become a tree. Capacity is understanding that I have this potential in me, having an awareness of that potential and appreciating that potential. That is capacity. And this is the reason why Jesus spoke about seeds so many times. Because everything that you have is a seed. Are you understanding this? And you need to look at everything you have in your life as a seed. Because once you look at everything in your life as a seed, you understand that it has an inherent capacity within it to grow and multiply and produce after its likeness if I take care of this thing. Once you start envisioning and visualizing everything that you have in your life as a seed, you will begin to understand that you have a lot and you don't lack anything. But like everything else, there is a danger here. A lot of people become fascinated with this potential, endlessly saying, I have these things that I have. But not doing anything about it. We have these treasures in earthen vessels. We have these treasures in earthen vessels. You declare that every time I have these treasures in this earthen vessel. You decree it, you declare it, but you don't do anything to bring out those treasures. There will always be treasures inside of you. But until you bring them out and you appreciate their value and you expose them to the world, it is only at that point in time that they'll begin to do something for you. Potential without development remains potential. Admiring a seed never makes it a harvest. It's a seed, singular. Unless you put it in the ground and take care of it and nurture it, only then will you then get a harvest. That is the reason why appreciation is not enough, because we need to move from appreciation to development. And how do we get there? We cross another bridge. The bridge that we cross is stewardship. Stewardship is the decision to become responsible for the growth of what God has entrusted to you. Awareness says, I have a seed. Appreciation says, this seed has extraordinary potential. Stewardship then says, since this seed has extraordinary potential, it is now my responsibility to cultivate it. And that is a profound shift. Because once something becomes your responsibility, excuses disappear from your life. You can't wake up and start asking, why has this thing not grown? Because you are responsible for it to grow. So when you see that it's not growing, the next thing that you do is, how can I help this thing to grow? Because you have taken responsibility for that seed. And that is stewardship. If we go back to the widow in the scripture that I just read, she did not just admire the jar of oil, she obeyed. She gathered many jars. She prepared her house. She involved her sons. She created the conditions for multiplication. And that is stewardship. Once you decide to become responsible for your growth, you begin asking a different question. Not what do I have, not what could it become. But how do I become better? Because it is only through you becoming better that your stewardship increases. And that is the third rung on the capacity ladder. Development. How do I become better? How do I improve what I have? One of the discoveries that I made about God is this. God is far more interested in who you are becoming than in what you are receiving. Because who you are becoming enables you to keep what you are receiving. Are you understanding this? Who you are becoming makes you able to keep whatever it is that you will receive. When you pray, Lord, give me more opportunities, Lord, increase me, Lord, bless me, can you open doors for me? What if God is asking a different question? And the question is, what are you doing with what I have already given you? What are you doing with what I have already given you? And that is the question that causes us to develop ourselves. Because capacity, unfortunately, never grows accidentally. It grows intentionally. And one of the greatest myths in entrepreneurship is that successful people simply have more talent than everybody else. That is not true. What separates successful entrepreneurs from the rest of the entrepreneurs is development. The steps they take to develop themselves. How they put themselves into their craft, dedicate themselves in total submission. This is what makes them better than everybody else. This is what separates them. Development takes ordinary abilities and deliberately improves them. An entrepreneur who wants to become great must become a student. They must practice, they must learn, they must fail, they must improve. And they must repeat that process over and over again until they get what they are looking for. And through that process, what is ordinary can then become extraordinary. Not because you're born differently, no, but because you take the time to develop yourself differently. When the widow recognized the oil, that I have just a little bit of oil, when she appreciated its potential, Elisha didn't perform the miracle immediately. He told her, go and borrow some jars. Empty jars. Now, for someone who wants to make oil, borrowing jars has nothing to do with making oil. The only thing that borrowing jars did was to increase capacity, to prepare capacity to receive. Sometimes God prepares us for increase in ways that seem unrelated to the increase itself. You are looking for money, go and borrow jars. Why do I need jars? You don't understand the process. But every jar that she collected represented additional capacity. Every jar declared that I believe there will be enough. That is development. And I don't want you to look at the spiritual side of this miracle. I want you to look at the practical side of it. Because when you do, you understand that development is preparing yourself for the future that you believe God is leading you towards. I have a little oil. I am borrowing a lot of jars because I want to fill these jars with oil. And when I fill these jars with oil, I'll then sell this oil and service my debt. You don't understand that process. So sometimes the only thing that you can do is to study for that next degree. Learn just a little bit more to build your capacity. People will be asking you, why are you studying again? You already have another degree. Why do you need this one? You are building what? Capacity. Are you understanding this? Because if the opportunity that you have been praying for arrives tomorrow, would you be ready? And I want you to think about that carefully. If someone offered you $1 million investment tomorrow, can you manage it? Some of the things that we are looking for, we are not prepared for them. If your business doubled in size next month, will you be open after 2 months? $100 new customers in that garment making factory of yours. You get an order of 100 dresses. As a tailor, are you able to make those 100 dresses and produce the same quality? Capacity. Or after a month, people will be suing you. 100 people will be suing you for the money that you took and the promises that you made, but you failed to deliver. And then they'll go out with your name and tell everyone, do not ever give that person business because they don't deliver when you give them a project. Why is this happening? It's happening because you have not built capacity. So your greatest need as an entrepreneur right now may perhaps not be a big opportunity. Perhaps it's greater capacity. And once we begin to think like that, it changes everything. Because now we stop waiting for opportunity and we start preparing for opportunity. Opportunity must find us prepared for them. And I often tell entrepreneurs something that sounds strange at first. Never chase opportunities. Prepare yourself until opportunities begin to chase you. And the reason why I say this is because I understand one principle. Opportunities are attracted to capacity. Investors look for capable founders. Customers look for capable businesses. Partners look for capable organizations. People trust people who have developed themselves. People who have built capacity. And when you have done your preparation and when you've put in the work, you develop the confidence. A lot of the times people will say, I'm not confident enough to do this. No, it's not that you are not confident enough to do this. You are not prepared enough to do this. Because preparation gives you confidence. Confidence comes from knowing that you have done the required work to produce the results that are needed at that particular point in time. If you take a grade 3 student and you sit them in a grade 7 exam, They will obviously be afraid because they know that there is a lot of information that they don't have that is required in this exam. But a grade 7 student who is prepared will know that I have done enough. Are you getting this? It's important to be practical in things like this so that we know how we actually develop capacity. I believe there are 5 ways of developing capacity. The first is through learning. Read, study. Remain curious. Never assume you have arrived. The entrepreneur who stops learning eventually stops growing. So you need to keep learning. The second way to build capacity is through practice. Knowledge without repetition never becomes a skill. You prepare for a marathon by running. Are you understanding this? You learn to run a business by actually running a business. You learn to lead by actually leading. Reading about leadership does not make you a leader. Reading about sales does not make you a salesperson. Selling does. Capacity grows through repetition. The third way to learn is through feedback. One of the fastest ways to grow is to allow someone wiser than you to tell you where you need to improve. Someone who is more experienced, who has gone through this before. And a lot of the times to be told where you need to improve requires a lot of humility. And humility accelerates development. The fourth way to build capacity is through failure. Failure is not simply something that we survive. It is something to study, because every mistake carries with it a lesson. And as entrepreneurs, we must never waste failures. We must always mine every failure for wisdom, because it prepares us to try again, this time wiser than we were the first time that we did. And it improves our chances of surviving this time. And the last thing that improves our capacity is discipline. There is no shortcut around disciplined growth. Every remarkable entrepreneur that you admire has paid the price of consistent development. And this happens usually long before anyone notices them. So if I were to ask you one question, which is, what is the most important capability you need to develop over the next 12 months? Not 10, not 9, not 8, 1. What is it? Communication, financial management, leadership, negotiation, technology. Which one is it? Because sometimes you just need to pick one thing that you build on. The reason why you need to pick one thing is because focused development always outperforms scattered effort. The entrepreneur who improves one critical capability every year becomes almost unrecognizable after a decade. Because small improvements repeated consistently create extraordinary lives. One of the mistakes we make as a continent is we believe that development only refers to roads, bridges, electricity, or infrastructure. So when we campaign, we are talking about things that people can actually see. Those things matter. I'm not reducing their value. But the infrastructure that you build today, depreciates tomorrow. Economies are built on the capacity of their people. And one of the greatest resources Africa has is its people. We need to build capacity as Africans, because when we build capacity, when entrepreneurs grow, their businesses grow. When their businesses grow, the communities grow. When communities grow, nations grow. Are you understanding this? Development or developing entrepreneurs is never personal. It is a civic duty. It is national. It is communal. Because every community that builds its entrepreneurs becomes better for it. And that's the reason why every act an entrepreneur takes to develop themselves, to make themselves better, is an act of service to their country, is an act of service to their continent. But I don't want you to make the mistake of spending your entire lives in cycles of development that don't lead you anywhere. Another course, another qualification, another certification, another book, but you are not really utilizing these things to extract value out of them. You must never become a permanent student who doesn't build anything, because development without action is futile. Everything that you learn must eventually leave the classroom. It must leave the notebook. It must leave your head and must be useful to somebody else. It's not what you know. It's what you do with what you know. So the question is, how do we move from development to actually creating value? And this leads us to the third bridge, which is action. Where development prepares you, action reviews you. You can spend years becoming capable, but until you apply that capability, the world cannot benefit from it. The world benefits from the action that you take. Are you understanding this? If awareness shows you what you have, appreciation shows you what it can become, and development helps you improve it. The decisive moment comes when you ask yourself, will I use this? Whatever you do not use dies. A muscle that you do not use atrophies. The capacity that you do not use depreciates. But when you apply it, it becomes stronger. The widow had to eventually stop collecting jars and to start pouring. There came a time when Elisha's instructions demanded something very simple. Pour. Pour. You have collected the jars, they are there, you have built the capacity. Start pouring. Are you understanding this? The miracle for the widow began when she started pouring. And builders, I want you to understand this. There comes a time when preparation must become action. Learning must become doing. Thinking must become building. Because that is the fourth rung on the capacity ladder. Application. What can I use this thing for? Where can I use what I have? The challenge for Africa is not untapped potential. I believe the greatest challenge of African entrepreneurship is unused potential. Many qualified people, knowledgeable people, who are not using what they learned. There is no application. Marketing degrees, no application. Engineering degrees, no application. Many gifted people whose gifts are not serving anyone. Highly educated people whose knowledge never left the classroom. The only thing that they learned to do was to write a CV. Apply that knowledge. Apply that knowledge. Universities prepare us for the world. And the world is waiting for us to apply what we learned in the university. Ladies and gentlemen, we must stop feeling sorry for ourselves because there is no one to employ us. We must ask ourselves, what can this thing become? What can your degree become? What can that knowledge become? Apply that knowledge. When you leave college with a degree and you spend 5 years without applying it, you will forget most of the things that you learned. What will be left with you is a paper and a record that you passed through a university. But if we are to sit you in the same exam that you sat in when they conferred that degree, we'll find out that you don't know anything anymore. Because whatever knowledge you don't use, you lose. Whatever knowledge you don't apply is lost. Unused opportunities disappear. Everything that you have in this life grows because you are using it. Your capacity grows because you are using it. The lady recognized the oil. She appreciated its potential. She developed capacity by gathering jars. But all those things did not solve a problem. The problem was her debt. The creditors were still coming. Nothing had changed until she began to pour. Imagine if the debtors had come with her standing in the house, the little jar of oil there, and all these empty jars there. The children could still have been taken as slaves if she had not started pouring. But if they came when she was pouring, she would tell them, wait, I'm doing this. I'll give you the money when I'm done doing this. At some point, you must begin. At some point, you must make that first sale. At some point, you must write that first chapter to that book. At some point, you must build that prototype. Visit the first customer. At some point, you must record that video and share it. Launch the website. Open the office. Teach the first class. And I want you to know this, that almost always the first step that you take is never perfect. But it is always necessary. Think of a child. When they start working, they will fall immediately when they want to stand up. The first steps are never perfect. So if you wait for perfection, you are not going to do anything. Capacity grows through application, not intention. Confidence only comes because you have taken the action. Through application, not the other way around. That is the reason why waiting until you feel ready is one of the greatest traps an entrepreneur can fall into. Because it negates the reality that you become better by doing. What knowledge have you been carrying for years that you have never applied? What business have you been planning to start? What product have you been planning to launch? What service have you been planning to offer? How long have you been preparing? Perhaps the greatest obstacle to your future is no longer ignorance. Maybe now it's hesitation. You're just failing to take that next step. Your first vision is not supposed to impress the world. It's supposed to educate you. The first version of your product tells you what the next version needs. It's feeding information back to you as it interacts with the world. The second prepares you for the third. The third prepares you for the 10th. That is how progress is made. Because excellence rarely is the result of a perfect beginning. Excellence is the result of continuous application, regardless of the result that we are seeing on the ground. Entrepreneurs develop by building, not by waiting. One of the greatest opportunities before our continent today is not to simply produce more graduates, it's to produce more builders. People who take knowledge and apply it. Transforming ideas into enterprises, research into products, innovation into industry, vision into institutions. We cannot negate the value of knowledge. But like Moses' rod, you have to throw it down. You have to apply it. Because when you apply that knowledge, it changes economies. Applying knowledge for an entrepreneur and for every African is not simply a personal discipline. It is a national necessity. We need it now if our countries and our continent are to get out of the situation that we are in. And this week, I want you to ask yourself one question. What is that one thing that I know that I can start applying immediately? Not next week, not next month, not next year. Immediately. If it's approaching your first customer, do it. If it's registering your business, do it. If it's testing your idea, do it. Sometimes, when you do these things, they teach you things that you don't know. Sometimes they reveal to you things that you already know. You cannot change your life in a week. But when you consistently apply knowledge every week, your life ultimately changes. Your capacity eventually grows. But this is something that I have also noticed, that when you start applying your capacity, something remarkable begins to happen. Your world begins to expand. You discover new opportunities. You also discover new challenges, new relationships, and new responsibilities. The more you use your capacity, the larger your capacity becomes. And this brings us to another important question. How do we deliberately increase our capacity year after year? How do we continue growing? Because when we have started growing, when a tree starts growing, it needs to continue growing. So how do we create the environment that is favorable for this growth? When you have started something, as an entrepreneur building something, you must not become comfortable with where you get. Because you need to remember the principle of life. What is not growing is dying. This is the principle of life. When you look at something that is not growing, come back after some time, you will come back and see that it's declining. So when you have grown to a certain level, and when we have built to a certain capacity, you find yourself at the next bridge that will lead you to the next rank. And this is stretching. Stretching your capacity. Stretching your abilities. When you stretch yourself through application, inevitably, whatever you are doing will begin to expand. Whenever you apply your current capacity, unfortunately, you will eventually reach the limit. And when you reach a limit, it's not failure, it's growth. Are you understanding this? Because when you don't grow to a certain level and stop, you will never discover that there is a next level. But when you look at yourself and you audit yourself and you see that I have stopped growing, immediately you ask yourself why you are not growing, and then you begin to stretch yourself. You begin to challenge yourself. You begin to challenge your current abilities, going beyond where you're comfortable. Stretching is volunteering for more responsibility. It's taking on bigger projects, serving more customers, leading larger teams, thinking bigger thoughts. And this is uncomfortable. But every act of stretching your current abilities is transformational. The widow poured one jar after another. And imagine pouring from a little oil and filling one jar. When one jar is full and you're going to the next, it needs a new level of faith to say, I've already filled this jar with this oil. Can I fill the next? Can I fill the next? Can I fill the next? And every step that you go along the way stretches your capacity. So if you feel stuck and you feel like you can't grow, maybe you haven't reached the limit of your capacity. Maybe you haven't stretched it enough. Because if you stretch it, that is how you get to the next rung on the capacity ladder, which is the 5th rung. By asking one question, how do I increase my capacity? Like I have shown you, capacity is never static. It's either increasing or it's decreasing. No one in this life remains the same. It's either you're growing or dying. Are you understanding this? It's either your business is growing or it's dying. If you stop learning, your capacity begins to shrink. The same happens if you stop challenging yourself. The same happens if you stop building. Contrary to popular belief, growing is not automatic. Neither is decline. Both are results of daily decisions that we make. That is why, as builders, we must never become satisfied with where we are today. We must be grateful that we have come this far. But we must understand and always believe that we are not yet finished. This is the difference between entrepreneurs who make a difference in the world and those who just get by. Some entrepreneurs seem to be growing every year, while some become easily overwhelmed by success. The difference is what? Capacity. Two entrepreneurs receive the same level of growth. One receives 100 customers, the other received 100 customers. One flourishes, the other collapses. Capacity. Same opportunities can produce different results depending on your level of preparedness. You need to grow into the opportunity. There is a difference between growing into the opportunity and growing to the opportunity. Those are two different things. When you grow into the opportunity, you carry everything that's required for that level. But when you just get to it, it's easy to arrive there as a visitor who knows nothing about interacting with this opportunity. So, opportunities sometimes do not determine the outcomes that we face in life. It is capacity that determines those outcomes. I believe this is one of the reasons why God does not give us everything at once. Because if the blessing grows faster than the builder, the blessing eventually becomes a burden. Pregnancy is a blessing. But imagine a 13-year-old being pregnant. Can that be considered a blessing? Imagine a 15-year-old running a multinational company. Would that be a blessing? They are not prepared for that level. That responsibility will crush them if they are not taught how to manage it. Sometimes the problem is not the opportunity, and it's not that the opportunity is bad. Most of the times, the problem is the capacity has not yet caught up. There are some things that we don't receive in this life, not because they are not because we don't deserve them, but because we are just not ready for them. Listen to how Elisha instructs the widow. He says, don't ask for a few jars. Don't ask for a few jars. Why not just borrow 5? Why not 10? Why not tell her to borrow as many as possible? Because the size of her preparation, the size of the capacity that she is building determines the size of the harvest that she will get. When she was pouring, the oil did not stop because it was finished. The oil stopped because the jars were finished. When you pour yourself into your work and you get out there and you do everything that you are doing, Sometimes you stop growing, you stop earning, you stop receiving, you stop getting clients because your capacity is filled. When you find yourself at that place where you're saying, why can't we break this ceiling? You need to stretch yourself, you need to expand yourself, build more capacity. If your influence doubled next year, would your leadership double with it? Because influence and leadership are two different things. Influence comes to you. Leadership comes out of you. Will you be able to command the rooms that you're going to walk into? If your income tripled, will you be financially disciplined enough to manage that income? Will it grow you or will it kill you? If your business grew today and your team grew from 2 people to 50 people, will you be able to manage 50 people? Capacity. Capacity. Entrepreneurs must ask those questions before growth arrives, not after. So how do we deliberately expand our capacity? I believe expansion happens in 4 ways, and the first one is by embracing bigger responsibilities. Don't spend your life doing only what you can already do comfortably. Growth begins where comfort ends. Stretch yourself. Second, you need to solve bigger problems. Don't run away from difficult problems. Learn from them, find them, and solve them. That is how you expand your capacity. The third way you expand your capacity is by increasing your standards. How do you improve your communication? How do you improve your thinking? How do you improve your systems? How do you improve your discipline? Expansion often looks very ordinary, but it is not. It is a refusal to remain average. When you're content with being ordinary and fight it, you expand your capacity. And finally, you need to surround yourself with people who stretch you. One of the fastest ways of growing, of expanding your thinking, is to spend time with people who are already carrying greater responsibility. Their questions become your questions, their standards become your standards, and their habits begin to shape yours. And this is why a community matters. We're building the Next Africa Entrepreneurs Fellowship for this very reason. Because we understand that growth is very rarely a solo journey. You need to surround yourself with people who challenge you. Challenge each other. Challenge each other. African nations need to challenge each other. Political growth, infrastructure growth, these are all good. But in Africa, we need to grow human capacity. Human capacity. And we need to invest in the capabilities of our people. Now, you have done all these things, you have expanded yourself. But I have noticed something, that a lot of the times when we are doing this, eventually we come to a place where we become exhausted, where it becomes tiring. Because sometimes when we're talking about these things, it's tempting to believe that we can perpetually do this work without it taking something from us. Everyone gets tired. But one of the reasons why we become tired or we become exhausted on this journey is because a lot of the times when entrepreneurs start, we want to do everything ourselves. You are doing the marketing, you are doing the selling, you are creating the product, you are talking to the suppliers, you are the cleaner, sometimes even the driver yourself. But if we are to build capacity, we need to understand that this approach reaches its limit. Your energy reaches its limit. Your knowledge also reaches its limit. If you are going to continue growing, you need to change some things. And you must move from increasing your effort to increasing your leverage. And that is where we cross another bridge. And this bridge is trust. Trust is how we move from expansion to multiplication. There comes a point in the life of every entrepreneur where we must accept a different truth. That you cannot build something truly significant alone. Not because you're incapable, but because significance eventually exceeds individual capacity. Trust teaches you to believe in other people. It teaches you to delegate responsibility, to ask other people to stand for you. It helps you to build teams, create systems, to teach others, and to release control. And that is a very difficult thing for many entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, if you insist on doing everything yourself, your business can never grow beyond you. The widow did not fill every jar alone. Her sons brought her the jars. The miracle still flowed through her obedience, but it was multiplied through the participation of her sons. And that is how great enterprises are built. And that is how great nations are built. One capable person building the capacity of many others. And that is what takes us to the 6th rung on the capability ladder, which is multiplication. How can I produce more than I can produce alone? You get here by realizing that where your capacity seemed to be the thing that your business needs, now your capacity is the reason why growth is stalling in your business. You have become the limitation in your business. Money is no longer the limitation, it's there. The orders are coming. Your competition is not the limitation, you're winning. The economy is not limiting you, the revenue is growing. It's you. There are only 24 hours in a day. And you can only meet so many customers, lead so many people, solve so many problems, and work so many hours. Eventually, we all find that limit of individual effort. When you realize that you can't solve this by working harder, but you can solve this by bringing other people, by building differently, that is where multiplication begins. Entrepreneurs need to enable other people. Imagine being a carpenter and you are making chairs and tables, and every chair that's made in your workshop is made by you. How many people can you save? You need to train more people to work like you do, produce the quality that you produce, and to serve more customers the same way that you serve these customers. When you do that, you are multiplying yourself. Now, when other people come in, you need a system that manages these people. When growth comes in, you need a system that manages this growth. When you build these systems, production grows. Bring in better machinery, production grows. What happened? The entrepreneur did not grow stronger. No, they multiplied their capacity. Now, when you read the Bible, those short sentences can carry a lot of meaning. The children were participating in the process. Participation, she built a team around this miracle. What could have taken her 5 hours to do took a shorter time because her sons were bringing the jars to her. You cannot become national alone. You cannot build a multinational organization alone. You grow your capacity as a leader by growing your teams, building the systems, and sharing the responsibility. Then this is the question that I need to ask every entrepreneur in this room. If you became seriously ill for the next 3 months, what would happen to your business? Would everything stop? Would customers disappear? Would operations collapse? If the answer is yes, perhaps you've just built a job for yourself. If you are going to turn this thing into a business, you need to let this thing go. You need to put it into the hands of other capable people. One of the greatest leadership lessons in Scripture comes from Moses' time as a leader of Israel, when he tried to lead an entire nation by himself, morning until evening, every dispute, every decision, every complaint, until one day his father-in-law Jethro visited him and told him, what you're doing is not good. Not evil, not wrong, simply not good, not sustainable. It may be working, but is this the correct way to do this? Is this the sustainable way to do this? Because one thing that we must infuse in everything that we are doing is sustainability. Can we do this consistently over a long period of time and produce the same results? Jethro had understood something that Moses had not yet learned, that leadership without multiplication eventually produces exhaustion. So he told Moses to appoint leaders over thousands, over hundreds, 50s, and 10s. The work didn't reduce. It was still the same amount of work. There was no decrease there. What increased was the capacity. There were now many people who could do things that Moses himself was doing, and it freed him to solve the more complex issues and to attend to the other issues as he was leading the nation. And this is what I believe is the greatest transition every entrepreneur must make. Transitioning from how can I do more to how can I enable more to be done. And those are completely different questions. How can I do more builds dependence? When people know that you do everything, they'll come to you with everything. How can I enable more to be done? It's this kind of question that builds an institution. And this is why multiplication is so important, because it transforms entrepreneurs into builders of organizations rather than workers inside organizations. We tend to celebrate visionary founders, remarkable leaders on our continent, and their stories inspire us. But individual excellence is not what will transform our communities, our nations, and our continent. Our success must be secured when extraordinary individuals deliberately decide to multiply themselves. We must become entrepreneurs who train, who mentor others, who delegate responsibility, who create systems, who build teams, and who raise successes. And this is the only way that we can build institutions that continue long after we are gone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is multiplication. And it's important that we make this very practical. If you are a business owner, you need to ask yourself, what am I still doing today that someone else could be taught to do? And you need to write those things down. Not because you're trying to become less valuable, but because you're trying to become more strategic in the way that you operate. Every task that you successfully transfer to somebody else creates space for high-value thinking. Because as an entrepreneur, your greatest contribution to the company is not the work that you are doing. It's designing the system that allows the work to happen. I want you to try this. Over the next few months, choose one person, and teach them everything that you know about one area of your work. Train yourself to distribute knowledge and not to hoard all the knowledge and keep it to yourself. It doesn't pay you as an entrepreneur to become indispensable by hiding information. You need to become indispensable by creating more capable people. Because ultimately, the great leaders of our generation will not be remembered by what we are capable in, but who will be remembered by who we make capable. How we train the next generation, how we multiply who we are. But even if we do all this, multiplication is not the highest expression of capacity. Because it is possible to still build large organizations and still stop growing. Therefore, the entrepreneur must ask themselves another question. How do I become exceptional? Because you can only train people to the level where you are trained yourself. Are you understanding this? If I'm asking you to go and find somebody else that you can train, that person will only grow to your level. And if they are following you and they are following your vision, and they have seen you grow to this level and stop, they will think that growing to this level and stopping is acceptable. So you can't tell them to grow beyond the level where you have grown yourself. So you need to become exceptional. And you become exceptional by asking yourself continuously, how can I become exceptional? Multiplication increases output. When you train more people to do the things that you have been doing, what you increase is what? Output. But when output increases, we need to make sure that we are producing the same consistent quality. So quality control becomes important. How do we increase quality? We increase quality through mastery. And mastery is achieved by crossing the bridge of excellence. Multiplication teaches us to produce more. Excellence teaches us to produce better. The entrepreneur who pursues excellence never becomes satisfied with average. They continue to refine their art. They improve, they simplify, they innovate, they learn. But when we talk about excellence, we are not talking about perfection. Because perfection is an aspiration. But excellence is the disciplined pursuit of becoming better than you were yesterday. And that's how it becomes a bridge that transforms your experience into wisdom. It's a bridge that you cross through repetition, and you perfect it through craftsmanship. That's how you transform your work into an art. And you transform eventually an ordinary institution into an extraordinary one. Once you have done that, you achieve mastery, which is the 7th rank. Mastery is how some people become world-class entrepreneurs, changing the whole world, while others remain average. Companies that started in the same city can become different. Look at the companies in your community. 3 companies doing the same thing. All those companies can ultimately become 3 different enterprises. When you look at their success, sometimes it's different to picture the other ones and say, what happened to these ones? The difference was the other became comfortable at a certain level and they were left there. We need to understand that experience does not automatically produce excellence. Time does not produce mastery. There are people who have been doing the same thing for 30 years and they are simply repeating what they were doing last year, this year. So for 30 years they've been doing the same thing. Nothing improved. But within 10 years, someone who started with them became a master in the field. You look at these 2 different people, and they are not the same. The difference, one pursued mastery, the other one did not. There are people, entrepreneurs who are building businesses, who do enough to survive. As long as the business is taking care of their family, they are okay. There are people who do enough to succeed, just to get out of poverty. But there are people who are obsessed with being better, excelling at what they do, leading in their industry, pursuing excellence. And these are the people that change industries. They ask different questions. They don't ask, how little can I do? They don't ask, what's acceptable? They always look at everything around them and they ask, how can I make this better? They want to make every project, every customer, every conversation, everything must become better every day. And this is the mindset of mastery. When the lady was done pouring the oil, Elisha gave her another instruction. He said, go sell the oil. It's a small sentence, easy to overlook. But I want you to look at what it implies. It implies the oil had value. Are you understanding this? The oil had value. It implies that there were people out there who were going to buy this oil. So whatever she produced was something that somebody out there considered valuable. That is mastery. Mastery is not becoming better in ways that you only notice. It is becoming better in ways that other people will look at and say, this is something of value. It is becoming better in ways that genuinely improve people's lives. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to know that the market rewards value, not effort. It's not about how hard you work. It's about the value that you're producing, the value that you're creating. You can record videos for hours on end, but if there is no value in that recording, no one is going to listen. You need to package value. Something that somebody can look at and say, yes, this is something that I can sit down and spend my time on. Value. Produced through mastery, through excellence. Customers don't pay us because we work hard. They pay us because we solved a problem very well. And this is why mastery matters. Where is the next opportunity? This is the question that many entrepreneurs ask. Where is the next opportunity? But very few ask, how can I become so good that opportunities begin looking for me? Your name must begin to be mentioned in rooms where you are not. People must begin saying, where is that person? There is an opportunity here. Because when your name is mentioned, they associate it with excellence. You have become a master of your field. Mastery emerges through consistent and persistent character formation. Your character is within your control. It's something that you can build on every day. And that is why I believe that excellence is one of the greatest competitive advantages any entrepreneur can have. Because eventually markets change, technology changes, governments change, economies change. But when people know you as someone who consistently creates outstanding value, they will keep on coming to you. They will keep on looking for you. All of you here, if you are looking to hire an architect, do you hire someone who is average? If you fall sick today and you need a doctor, do you look for someone that they say, no, that one is average? You can never entrust your health to someone who is average. You will never pay your money to someone who is average if you believe there is someone who is better. As entrepreneurs, if average is not acceptable for doctors, for architects, and for everybody else, why is it acceptable for us? We serve people, and people deserve excellence. And in doing so, we honor God. But if you look at the people that God entrusted with great responsibility, these were not average people. There was nothing average about Joseph. There was nothing average about him. The Bible says he had a spirit of what? Excellence. Daniel distinguished himself above all other governors. Excellence is not a modern business idea. It's a kingdom principle. It's a God-given principle. Now, how do we pursue mastery? Likewise, number one, you never stop learning. The moment you think you have arrived, your growth begins slowing. Number two, measure your work. What gets measured gets improved. Please stop guessing. You need to know. How am I doing? Number three, seek honest feedback. Don't surround yourself with people who applaud you. Surround yourself with people who sharpen you. The fourth thing is practice deliberately. Don't merely repeat your work, improve your work. And finally, you need to raise your standards. Every year ask yourself, what would excellence look at the next level? Because pursuing mastery is not an event. It is a lifelong endeavor. But suppose you become exceptional. Your business flourishes. Your influence grows. People begin to recognize your excellence. Then what? Is mastery the end? No. Because there is one danger that accompanies mastery. It's pride. And pride goes before a fall. Success and mastery has a tendency to make one believe that everything exists for you. That everyone exists for you. You stop valuing people. You stop valuing anything that you have. You stop valuing knowledge. You begin to feel that because you're experienced, then doors should just open for you wherever you go. But we must learn that everything that has been entrusted to us does not end with us. We are a conduit through which these things flow to others. Which means the highest level of expression of mastery in one's life is not keeping it, is giving it away. Because what good is that skill? What good is all that knowledge and experience if it ends with you? And this is where we need to cross the final bridge, which is humility. We need to understand that we are dispensable. We need to know that what we are building and what we are doing doesn't have to end with us. It has to flow to the next person. And if the responsibility is to handing this over to the next person, to the next generation, then no matter how much we know, there's always more to learn, because we are custodians of this knowledge and we need to transfer it to the next person. So no matter how successful we become, we understand that there's always someone that we can serve. Not how much capacity we develop. That has to terminate with us. No. Humility transforms us from being experts into being mentors, from being professionals into being teachers, from being entrepreneurs into nation builders. Because humility asks one final question: who else becomes more capable because I lived? And that is the highest expression of capacity. That is what brings us to the final rank on the capacity ladder. And that is empowerment. Now that I'm here, now that I have achieved this, now that I have done this, whose capacity can I now build? Before I go deep into this rank, which is rank number 8, I want us to look at how far we have come. We begin by asking, what has God placed in my hands? We learned to appreciate it, we developed it, we applied it, we expanded it, we multiplied it, and we pursued mastery. And now we've arrived at one final question. Who becomes more capable because I built? We can't make the mistake of believing that capacity belongs to us. It is entrusted to us. Every gift that God gives us, knowledge, wisdom, influence, resources, leadership, none of them are simply given for our benefit. They are entrusted to us so that they may become a blessing to others. When God blessed Abraham, what did he say? So that you can become a blessing. The blessing was never supposed to stop with Abraham. It was supposed to flow through Abraham to its intended beneficiaries. The gift that you are building and packaging into a company, into an idea, into a product, it is not yours. You are a conduit through which this idea flows to its intended targets. Through you, this thing is going to manifest. And it is not yours. We increase our capacity so that we can increase the capacity of others. We increase our capacity so that we can enable others in their different vocations and their different spaces to do more with what we are giving them. I want you to think about the widow. When the story began, she was terrified. She believed her sons were about to become slaves. And by the time the story ends, those same sons have participated in building the family's future. They have been transformed from people who were destined for slavery to people who are now selling oil in the marketplace and have something to sell for the rest of their lives. I want you to think about that transformation. And I believe it is the greatest miracle of this passage. I don't believe the miracle was the payment of the debt. The miracle was that a family that was about to lose its future now possessed one. The sons didn't watch the miracle. They participated in it. They carried jars. They watched their mother obey. They saw what stewardship looked like. They saw what enterprise looked like. Without them realizing it, their own capacity was being developed. That is empowerment. The second thing that we need to understand is this all happened because the prophet himself had developed himself and had allowed himself to be used as a conduit of empowerment. If the prophet had not developed himself and was not sure of his abilities, these people were not going to be empowered. Are you understanding this? If Elisha wanted to feel important, what he would have done was to give these people the money they needed to pay so that they can ransom themselves out of this situation. But because he understood that if I give them the money, they will come out of this without the empowerment, Elisha understood that I need to live with this family a lesson. That there is a process to this. So that they become an example in their community, in their nation, as they have become to us now who are studying them, long after this thing has happened. And we are coming out of this also empowered. This is the highest calling of every entrepreneur. That's why I'll ask you this. What would remain if your business disappeared tomorrow? Would there be people who are better because they worked with you? Would there be young entrepreneurs who think differently because you mentored them? Would there be employees who become leaders because you invested in them? Would there be families whose life changed because you created an opportunity? Because ultimately that's how we measure our capacity. Not by what we accumulate, but by how much we multiply in other people. And I want to ask you another question. If everyone in your organization suddenly became exactly like you, what would your organization become? Would it be stronger or weaker for it? And I want you to think about that. Because ultimately leadership is about reproduction. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, we want to, or how we want to see it. You understand? We are intentionally or unintentionally creating people that look like us. We are building a culture that looks like the things that we believe in. And this is the responsibility that comes with bringing people to your vision. You are building after your own likeness. The question is, what is that likeness? The Bible says, if the light in you is darkness, how deep is that darkness? If the understanding that you believe you have is actually ignorance, how deep is that ignorance? If that revelation that you think you have is ignorance, how deep is that ignorance? You need to ask yourself these questions. Because we produce after our likeness. We produce after our likeness. We share according to our revelation. People around us are learning to solve problems. They are learning how to treat customers. They are learning how we respond to pressure. They are learning how we handle failure, how we pursue excellence. The question is not whether we are influencing people. The question is, what are we reproducing? And when we think like that, we begin to empower people. And this same thing applies to Africa. Sometimes we ask, what does Africa need? More capital, better infrastructure, or better policies? But I think Africa needs people who deliberately build the capacity of other Africans. It needs people who mentor, entrepreneurs who mentor, professionals who teach, business owners who lead, investors who transfer wisdom just as much as they transfer capital. It needs institutions that produce capable people. Nations rise not when they produce a few extraordinary individuals. They rise when extraordinary individuals deliberately produce thousands more after their own likeness. And that is how civilizations rise. I believe that is one of the greatest responsibilities of every entrepreneur. We are not called to create wealth. We are called to create capability. Every employee who leaves your business should become more capable than they were when they arrived. Every customer should become better because of the value that you created. Every supplier should trust you more because of how you conduct yourself. Every young entrepreneur who spends time with you should leave believing more is possible. That is empowerment. Now, I want to tell you something that I have learned. Knowledge increases when it is shared. Wisdom deepens when it is taught. Leadership expands when it is entrusted to others. And this is a key lesson for entrepreneurs because capacity grows not by protecting it, but it grows by reproducing it. That's why the Bible says, give and it shall be given unto you. The more you give away, the more you are entrusted with to give. Are you understanding this? As entrepreneurs, in our pursuit of greatness, we must understand that history rewards us, not simply for just building, but for enabling others to build. Building cultures, teams, and institutions. Building future leaders. This is the mark of a great leader. And all those leaders that we speak about, long after they are gone, their greatest product was in the company. It was the people that they produced. The people that they produced. When your life is over, what will still be growing because you lived? Will it only be a bank account, or will there be businesses, leaders, family, people, communities, and institutions that are living because you lived? Still flourishing because you chose to build the capacity of others. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the highest expression of entrepreneurship. As we come to the end of this masterclass, I want you to notice something beautiful. The capacity ladder doesn't end with you. Neither does the freedom ladder, neither does the vision ladder, neither does the purpose ladder. Every one of them ends with someone else. The freedom ladder ends with liberation. The vision ladder ends with manifestation. The capacity ladder ends with empowerment. And this is the pattern. God never develops people so they can become the destination. He develops people so they can become conduits. Everything He gives us is meant to flow through us. So, today I want to leave you with 5 questions. The first question comes from the purpose ladder. Why am I here on earth? It's a question you need to ask yourself. The second comes from the freedom ladder. Who must I become? The third comes from the vision ladder. What am I called to build? The fourth comes from the capacity ladder. How do I faithfully increase what God has already placed in my hands? And the last one comes from the value creation ladder. How much value should I create for my community, nation, and continent? And if you spend the rest of your life answering these 5 questions, I believe you will build something that matters. Not because life becomes easy, but because opportunity will suddenly begin to make sense. And they make sense because you've become the kind of builder who is prepared when those opportunities come. Remember where we started. The widow said, I have nothing except. She almost overlooked the very thing that God intended to multiply. What is your except? What have you been underestimating? What skill have you been neglecting? What opportunity have you been postponing? What relationship have you been overlooking? What idea have you dismissed because it seemed too small? Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps the opportunity is already in your house. Perhaps your prayer is answered in something that you already possess. Can you identify that thing? And ask yourself how you can faithfully develop what you already have. Because as builders, as entrepreneurs, we must not wait until we have everything. We must not begin until we have everything in our hands. We multiply what we have. We grow what we have. We master what we have. And we spend the rest of our lives helping others to do the same. 5 ladders to keep climbing, to keep growing, to keep building. And when your capacity has grown beyond anything you imagined, please build the capacity of another entrepreneur. Because the future of Africa will not ultimately be determined by the resources beneath our soil, but by the capacity we build within our people. And that is how we transform our nations. That is how we transform our communities. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we transform this continent. Thank you.